Okay, functions and data analysis fans. Our topic for today is Unit 1-8, Simple Interest. Oh, this should say FADA, not Algebra 2. Before we start here, let me tell you your joke of the day. What did one hat say to the other hat? The answer is, you stay here. I'm going to go on ahead. All right, so definition here, when we talk about interest, interest can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing. Interest is the charge of borrowing money. It's the cost. If you want to buy a car, you probably need to take out a loan, unless you can pay the whole amount at the beginning. Well, if you're going to borrow money from a bank or from a dealership, you're going to have to pay them back, but you're also going to have to pay extra. So the interest is that extra amount that you have to pay to borrow money. But it also works the other way, that if you put your money into a bank that pays interest on your account, you are loaning them money and they're paying you extra interest to borrow your money and to use it. So the process is you have the lender, the person who gives out the money, and they give the money to the person who is the borrower. So that is the general process. So some examples here. Example number one, let's say that you borrow $500 for 1 year at an annual interest rate of 10%. So what that means is that you will pay 10% of this at the end of the year. That's how much extra you are going to owe. So part A, how much interest do you owe the lender? And this is called simple interest, by the way, where we just calculate it at the end of the year. So how much do we owe? Well, it's 10% of $500. When you take a percentage of a number, what we do is we multiply, and that's going to give us $50. Now that's the interest amount. That's the extra. Interest is the extra amount that we have to pay. So what is your total payment? What's the total amount of your loan, let's say? Well, we borrowed $500, so we have to pay that back, plus the interest. So 500 plus 50 is $550. So that would be the total amount. Now part C, how much interest would you pay if you borrowed the money? So let's say we did 2 years, but let's assume that, again, it's an annual interest rate, so the rate is 10%. If this is simple interest, then what's going to happen is that we're going to pay $50 every year. So we'll make interest payments of $50 every year. So we would still pay, we have the $500 that we borrowed, we have to pay that back, plus 50 for the first year, so that's for the first year, $50, plus 50 more for the second year. And if we add that up, we would get $600. What if you borrowed the money for 6 months? Now 6 months, that is half a year. So what would happen if the annual interest rate is 10%, and for 1 year we would have to pay $50 of interest? If we do half the year, it would be half of 50, which is 25. So you would still owe $500, but because it's only for half the year, you would only pay $25 in interest. So the total amount would be $525. For part C, I should go back here. How much interest would you pay? Well, the interest would be 200. Would be 100, 50 plus 50. The interest would be $100. Okay, so that's the extra we would pay. The total would be 600. All right, so make that correction because the question was how much interest. The interest is $100. And here, for 6 months, the interest is 25, and then the total would be 525. So what we're going to do here, let's make a table and use the graph paper below to show the total amount owed for a loan of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 years. Now we already figured out that if the loan is 1 year and we're paying $50 of interest each year, at the end of 1 year we would owe $550. Now if we keep the loan for a second year, we're going to pay 50 more. So we would add 50 and this would now be 600. For 3 years we would add 50 more. So it would be $650 and then it would be 700 and then 750. So notice that each year, what's the change? Well, we keep going up by $50. We keep making that interest payment right there. Okay, so let's go ahead and graph this. Now I've already set up my plane here. My x-axis is going to be the time. So t is the time in years. 1 year all the way up to, well, I'll just go to 5 years. Okay, I went up to 6, but 5 is fine. Now for the money, I'm not going to start, now this is 0, 0 here, but I'm not going to go 50, 100, 150, because notice that our first value that we're going to plot really is 550. For 1 year, we're going to pay $550. So this first mark here is going to represent 500. That's a good starting point. I'm going to take my y-axis and put a little kind of squiggly line right here, a break, just to show that this distance is not going to be the same as each one of these. Each of these marks after 500 is going to be 50. So this would be 550, 600, 650, 700, 750, 800. Go ahead and pause the video and draw this so that you have it. Okay? So now, hopefully you paused it, you wrote this down. Let's go ahead and plot some points. Now, one of the things that we have here, so one year of the loan is $550. So 1 year is 550. And I skipped 2 spaces for each year. 2 years would cost us 600. 3 years is 650. 4 years is 700. And 5 years is $750. Now as you look at that, hopefully you see there's a nice pattern going on here. This actually looks like a straight line. And it is going to be a line. We're going to trace this. And the other thing you may notice is that, okay, if we're going backwards here to the left, notice this point would be 0, 500. So let's say you borrow the money, kind of like a credit card, but you pay it back right away. If you pay it back right away, you're not going to get charged that extra amount of interest. So for 0 years, if you pay it back immediately, you're only going to pay 500. So if we connect that, what we get here is a line. When we calculate simple interest, this is called simple interest, this is a linear relationship. Okay, so we would call this linear. That means it looks like a line. Linear relationship, it is a line. Now let's see if we can actually come up with an equation to represent this, okay, or a function. If we look at the points and how they're spaced out, I can pick 2 points, and each point I can go up this space and over this amount to get from one point to the next. I'm going up and over. Now when I go up, I'm not going up 1. This is actually 550 to 600. This is $50. So I'm going up $50, and then when I travel over here, this is not 2 spaces, this represents 1 year. Okay, from 1 to 2 is 1 year, so there's 1 year. Now if I go between these 2 points, I would go up again $50 and over 1 year. Now the way you can think about this, this is $50 for every 1 year. That's the change, what we call the rate of change. Each year that we have the loan, we will have to pay $50 more. So for every year, you have to pay $50 more. Now we have a name for this, a more official name. This rate of change here is what we call slope. So the slope is $50, okay, or 50 over 1. Because we think of slope as a fraction, we use the lowercase letter m. Now where does our line start? Where does our loan start? It starts right here at 500. Okay, so this is 0, 500 because the loan amount is originally $500. So as we try to pay for this, we're going to have to pay, we borrow 500, so we have to pay 500 no matter what. Now, how can we represent that each year will add another $50 of interest? Well, we're going to add, for every year, we have to pay $50. So I'm going to write that as 50 times t. T is the number of years. So if it's 1 year, 1 times 50 is $50 extra. If t is for 2 years, 2 times 50 is 100. So that would be $100 of interest. And now to make this more equation-like, you can say y equals 500 plus 50 times t, where the y is the dollar amount. Okay, y is your dollars, and t is the number of years that you have the loan. Now what this allows us to do here, let's say that we wanted to predict. Let's say the loan was for 20 years. And then we want to find out how much are we going to pay. Well, you could keep going up 50 each time. So this is 5 years. We could go up 50 15 more times. You could figure that out. But if you know the expression, or if you have an equation to represent what's going on here, we can just take that number 20, that's the time, and I can plug that into t. So I can do 500, we have to pay 500 for the loan, plus $50 for every extra year. So if that's 20 years, we would get 500 plus, this would be 1,000. So your loan amount, you would end up spending $1,500 if the loan was that long. So this is the thing about loans you have to be aware of with interest, is that the longer you have it, the more money you're going to pay. So whatever we bought for $500 in the end cost us $1,500. And that's the end of part 1.